The subject line read, "I can no longer hide it. My heart belongs to Sterling Architecture and to its queen." And somewhere between my third margarita and the moment I stopped paying attention to what Marcus was doing with my unlocked phone, my entire professional life had been reduced to that single catastrophically dramatic sentence, sent, delivered, and presumably read by the one woman in Manhattan whose expression I had never once been able to decode. I found out at 11:47 p.m. when the screen of my phone lit up with a notification from my work email. Message delivered. Recipient: Isabella M. Sterling, CEO. I stared at it for 4 full seconds. Then I ordered another margarita. If you've ever had your heart accidentally handed to someone who actually kept it, like this video and subscribe. This story is just getting started. There are a few things you should understand about me before this story goes any further. My name is Carla Vasquez. I am 28 years old. I have a master's degree in architecture from Columbia, a collection of vintage film posters that takes up more wall space than is legally defensible in a Manhattan apartment, and a genuinely unhealthy attachment to the idea that great design can fix almost anything. Crooked buildings, broken cities, fractured skylines. I believe in the transformative power of negative space. I believe that the most honest thing a structure can do is admit what it is holding up. I do not, as a general rule, believe in telling my boss I am in love with her. That particular belief, however, had not been consulted on the night of October 3rd, when Marcus Delgado, my best friend since undergrad, my emergency contact, and the single worst person to hand an unlocked phone to after 2 rounds of drinks, decided that the funniest possible conclusion to a game of most dramatic text you can write was to actually send the thing to her, to Bella Sterling, the Bella Sterling, CEO of Sterling Architecture, one of the 10 most influential design firms in North America. The woman who had, at 34, restructured an entire company's creative pipeline so efficiently that 3 competitors had hired consultants just to reverse engineer her methodology. The woman who wore gray like other people wore armor, who communicated primarily through carefully drafted memos and expressions that suggested she had been assembled rather than born, and who had, in the 14 months I had worked at Sterling, spoken to me directly a total of perhaps 32 times, most of which involved project deadlines. The woman who was, if I am being completely honest in a way that I was not yet capable of being on the night of October 3rd, the most quietly devastating person I had ever been in close proximity to. But we'll get to that. First, the bar. It was a Thursday. This matters because Thursdays at Sterling Architecture have a particular energy. The week is almost done, the weekend is close enough to smell, and the creative team tends to decompress in small, self-selected clusters at whatever bar is closest to the office. That week, it was a place on West 57th called The Blueprint, which had copper fixtures and exposed brick, and a menu that someone had clearly spent too much time designing, because the typography was beautiful, and the cocktail descriptions read like architectural briefs. Marcus had been waiting for me at a corner table with 2 margaritas and the particular expression he reserves for when he has already decided this is going to be a good night. Beside him was Priya Sharma, our mutual friend from the visualization team, who was on her second drink and currently annotating the cocktail menu with a red pen she had apparently brought from the office. "You're late," Marcus said. I was finishing a section model. I dropped into the chair across from him and picked up the margarita. "What are we doing?" "We," said Priya without looking up from her annotating, "are playing a game." The game, as it turned out, was simple. Someone names a recipient. Someone else writes the most dramatically overwrought message imaginable for that recipient. The kind of thing that belongs in a 19th century novel, not a real human inbox. Everyone votes on the best one. The winner gets their drinks paid for. It was a good game. We had played it before, usually targeting abstract recipients. A fictional landlord, a made-up client, an imaginary ex. Safe, comfortable, consequence-free absurdity. Except Marcus, who has the instincts of a man who has never once personally experienced the consequences of his own ideas, had apparently decided to raise the stakes. "Bella Sterling," he announced, with the casual confidence of someone detonating something from a very safe distance. The table went quiet. Priya looked up from her menu. I took a long sip of my margarita. "That's not funny," I said. "That's exactly why it's funny," Marcus said. "Come on, it's just a game. Nobody's actually going to send anything. You write it in drafts, we read it, we laugh, we move on. I'll even do it on my phone so there's zero chance of accidents. Why don't you use your phone then? Because your drafts folder is funnier. You have that whole internal monologue thing going on." He gestured vaguely at me. "You're more literary when you're a little bit scared." I should have said no. I should have closed the app and put the phone down and changed the subject and maybe also changed careers and moved to a different city entirely, just to be safe. Instead, and I want to be very clear that this decision was made by someone on her second margarita who had also not eaten lunch, I unlocked my phone and handed it to Marcus. "Fine," I said. "But keep it tasteful." Marcus Delgado's interpretation of tasteful, it turned out, was 240 words, written in the style of a passionate Victorian confession, addressed to the CEO of a major architectural firm, expressing undying devotion, professional admiration to the point of obsession, and what could only be described as an architectural metaphor for unrequited love that involved at least 3 references to load-bearing walls. He read it aloud. Priya laughed so hard she knocked over her drink. I laughed too, because it was genuinely very funny, and also because the alternative was acknowledging that some part of me had read every word and felt something complicated happen in my chest. The subject line was, "I can no longer hide it. My heart belongs to Sterling Architecture and to its queen." The opening line was, "Ms. Sterling, I have spent 14 months in your orbit, and in that time, I have come to understand that some structures are not built to be admired from a distance. They must be inhabited." It went on from there. It was absurd. It was overwrought. It was the kind of thing that would have gotten full marks in a creative writing class and immediate termination in any real professional context. Marcus hit save, put the phone down, held out his hand for the remaining margarita. We moved on. Except, and this is the part where I have to be honest about my own complicity, even if it was passive, even if it was accidental. My phone had been sitting on the edge of the table all night, and at some point between the second and third drinks, Marcus had picked it up again. I assumed he was showing Priya something. I was talking to someone from the structural team who had just arrived. I wasn't watching. I wasn't watching when he opened the drafts folder. I wasn't watching when, whether by deliberate mischief or the particular chaos that alcohol and a touchscreen produced together, his thumb landed on send instead of back. I wasn't watching when my work email dispatched, at 11:31 p.m. on a Thursday, a 240-word Victorian love letter to Isabella M. Sterling, CEO, with the subject line, "I can no longer hide it. My heart belongs to Sterling Architecture and to its queen." I found out 16 minutes later when my phone lit up with a delivery confirmation. I stared at it. The bar was loud around me. Someone was laughing at the next table. The copper fixtures caught the light. I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, stood in front of the mirror, and had a very brief, very quiet crisis. Then I went back to the table, ordered another margarita, and did not tell Marcus what had happened. This was, in retrospect, also a mistake. But at that point, I had already made so many mistakes that one more felt almost structural, like a crack in a foundation that you notice only after the building has already settled around it. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my apartment on West 89th, the one with the narrow kitchen and the window that faces a brick wall and the film posters that my landlord has never technically approved. And I stared at the ceiling and ran through every possible outcome of the morning with the methodical despair of someone who has spent years learning how to calculate load capacity. Option 1. Bella Sterling had not checked her email yet. It was late. She was, presumably, a human being who slept. Maybe the email was sitting in her inbox, unread, and I could get to work early enough to call IT and have it deleted before she ever opened it. Option 2. She had read it, recognized the tone as the obvious absurdity it was, laughed, or done whatever the Bella Sterling equivalent of laughing was, which I imagined involved a faint shift in the corner of one eye, and filed it away as an anomaly. Perhaps she would send a one-line reply. I believe this was sent in error. Please confirm. IMS. And I could say yes, absolutely, technical malfunction, deeply sorry, and we could never speak of it again. Option 3. She had read it, was deeply offended, and was currently drafting my termination notice in the same precise, clause-heavy language she used for every other document she produced. Option 4. And this one I dismissed almost immediately, because it was the most absurd thing my exhausted brain had produced all night. She had read it, and somehow, impossibly, taken it seriously. I fell asleep at approximately 4 a.m., having convinced myself that option 2 was almost certainly the answer, and that the morning would be awkward but survivable. The morning was not awkward. The morning was something else entirely. I arrived at the Sterling Architecture offices on the 32nd floor of a building on 6th Avenue at 8:14 a.m., earlier than usual, with coffee I hadn't tasted, wearing the blazer I keep for presentations, because it makes me feel marginally more capable of handling professional catastrophes. The office was mostly empty at that hour. The creative team doesn't typically come in before 9. The reception desk was staffed by Jordan, who gave me a small wave and then a slightly longer look, which I interpreted as either, "You seem nervous," or, "I already know something you don't." And I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to investigate which. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop. I spent 4 minutes staring at my inbox without actually reading anything. At 8:31, an internal message appeared. Ms. Vasquez, please come to my office at your earliest convenience. IMS. My earliest convenience. As though I had a choice. As though my convenience had anything to do with it. I closed my laptop. I picked up the coffee I still hadn't drunk. I walked down the long glass-lined corridor that connects the creative wing to the executive suite. A corridor that I have always thought was designed specifically to make whoever is walking it feel observed, which is probably intentional, because everything Bella Sterling has ever designed is intentional. And I knocked on the door of the corner office. Come in. Her voice is one of the things about her that I had never quite gotten used to, even after 14 months. It has a particular quality, low and precise, like a note held exactly as long as it is supposed to be held, never a fraction longer. It doesn't rise or fall the way most people's voices do when they are surprised or irritated or pleased. It simply is what it is, carrying information without visible editorial. I opened the door. Bella Sterling's office is almost aggressively minimal. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides, overlooking Midtown. A desk the color of pale ash, clean except for a laptop, a pencil cup, and whatever she is currently working on. 2 chairs for visitors that are more architectural than comfortable. On the single solid wall behind her desk, 1 framed technical drawing, her own, from a project that won a major prize 6 years ago, and nothing else. She was standing when I came in, which was unusual. She typically works seated, moving between laptop and drawing board with the economy of someone who has calculated exactly how much motion is necessary and does not intend to exceed it. She was holding something. A sheet of paper. I recognized the font. My own. Ms. Vasquez. She looked at me. Her eyes are a particular shade of gray-green that I have always struggled to name precisely. Not because the color is complicated, but because the expression in them is layers beneath layers, like looking through architectural drawings stacked on a light table. Please close the door. I closed the door. She held up the paper. My email, printed out, because of course she had printed it out, because Bella Sterling prints out everything she takes seriously, and the stack of printed documents on her desk at any given moment is an accurate map of what she considers worth keeping. And she set it down with the particular care of someone placing something fragile. I received your communication, she said. I began. I reviewed it thoroughly, she continued, as though I hadn't spoken. The language is somewhat unconventional, and the architectural metaphors, while imprecise, demonstrate an understanding of structural philosophy that I find consistent with your existing work. A pause. I also cross-reference the timestamp against your typical correspondence patterns, and while late evening messages are not outside your normal behavior, the register is notably more personal than your standard professional communication. I opened my mouth, closed it. She picked up the paper again. Read a line from it. I cannot repeat which line, because even now it makes something in my sternum contract with secondhand embarrassment, and set it back down. In terms of productivity and compatibility metrics, she said, with the measured tone of someone reading from a very carefully considered document, I have analyzed the proposition you outlined and find it viable, more than viable in fact, mutually beneficial, given a number of variables I have been monitoring for some time. The faintest pause. Therefore, I accept. The word hung in the air between us. I thought, I am still asleep. This is a dream. This is what happens when you don't eat lunch and drink 3 margaritas on an empty stomach. Your subconscious produces baroque professional nightmares that are somehow simultaneously the worst and most inexplicable things that have ever happened to you. You accept, I repeated. Your offer of exclusivity, she said. Yes. I believe the phrasing was... She glanced at the paper. A commitment to be present in your orbit and no others. I find that acceptable. Reciprocal exclusivity is a reasonable foundation for any functional arrangement. She looked at me again. I suggest we begin by synchronizing our schedules. I'll have my assistant send you a shared calendar access. My mouth was doing something. I'm not entirely sure what. Ms. Sterling. Bella, she said. If we are entering a personal arrangement, first names are more efficient. Bella. The name felt strange in my mouth, not because I had never thought it before. I had, more times than was strictly professional, but because I had never allowed myself to say it out loud, to her, in this office, in this context. I want to make sure we're on the same page, about the email. The email was clear, she said. Your friends have previously ribbed you about your tendency to over-formalize emotional expression. The Victorian register of the text is consistent with someone attempting to communicate something genuine using a stylized frame that provides distance. A pause, so brief I almost missed it. I understand the impulse. I use memos for the same purpose. I stared at her. She stared back. For a moment, just a moment, something moved through her expression that was not the usual flatlined precision. Something that looked, if I had to name it, like the particular kind of careful hope that belongs to people who have been disappointed enough times to keep it very, very quiet. Then it was gone, and she was picking up her pencil, and her voice returned to its standard operational temperature. I'll have the calendar access sent by noon, she said. I assume you have the Meridian Project review at 2. I'll observe the final 10 minutes. I want to see how the structural integration reads against the updated elevations. She looked up, just for a second. You may go, Carla. It was the first time she had used my first name without a title. I left the office. I walked back down the long glass corridor. I stood at my desk, very still, for approximately 45 seconds. Then I sent Marcus a text that read, I am going to kill you. More information to follow. Here is the thing about Bella Sterling, that the architectural press, the industry profiles, and the careful mythology surrounding her professional reputation do not fully capture. She is not actually cold. I know that is not what anyone says about her. I know that the running description, offered in tones ranging from awed to faintly hostile, depending on who is doing the describing, is precise, demanding, impossible to read, possibly a robot. I know that people on the creative team have a phrase for particularly efficient but emotionally remote feedback, and that phrase is going full Sterling, and that it is not intended as a compliment, except by the people who admire efficiency enough to make their peace with the absence of warmth. But I had been watching her for 14 months. It is possible that this is a damning thing to admit about your boss, that you have been watching her, accumulating data in the quiet way that people accumulate data about things they find themselves unable to stop looking at. But I am an architect. Observation is what we do. We look at things until we understand how they hold together. And what I had understood, slowly, over 14 months of morning briefings and project reviews and shared elevator rides, and the particular silence of a 32nd floor at 7 p.m. when everyone else has gone home. What I had understood is that Bella Sterling is not cold. She is precise. She is demanding. She is constitutionally incapable of small talk, and deeply uncomfortable with the kind of ambient emotional noise that most social environments run on. But she notices things. Small things. She had remembered, 6 months into my time at Sterling, that I drink my coffee black with exactly 1 sugar, and from that point forward, whenever there was catered coffee at a meeting, there was always 1 cup prepared exactly that way near my usual seat. She had never mentioned it. She had never asked whether I noticed. It was simply there. She remembered that I had mentioned once, in a site visit debrief, that I struggle with presentations when I haven't had enough time to prepare, and that from that point forward, her project assignments always came with 48 hours more runway than the rest of the team received. No explanation. No acknowledgement. Just consideration, expressed in the language of logistics. She had noticed, on a Tuesday in March, that I had been working through a tension headache, and had sent an internal message at 3 p.m. that said only, "The Meridian Review has been rescheduled to Thursday. Prioritize rest this evening," and then had given no further indication that it had happened. She communicated in actions because words, for her, were technical instruments, precise, functional, occasionally insufficient for the thing she was trying to convey. She had learned to say what she meant in memos and schedules and project structures, and the careful placement of 1 prepared coffee cup, because at some point, I suspected, she had tried to say it in the other way and found the vocabulary unavailable. This is not an excuse for what I did next, but it is context. Because when I sat back down at my desk and tried to think clearly about the situation, the email, the acceptance, the "I believe" the phrasing was a commitment to be present in your orbit and no others, the voice in my head that was screaming, "Tell her the truth. Tell her it was a joke. Tell her right now before this gets worse," was fighting a losing battle against a quieter voice that was saying, "She said she finds it viable. More than viable. She said mutually beneficial, given variables I've been monitoring. She has been monitoring variables. She used your first name. I am not proud of the choice I made, but I am honest enough to admit that I made it with both eyes open, even if they were open while looking at something I wasn't yet ready to name. I did not correct the misunderstanding that morning. The calendar access arrived at 11:47 a.m. I stared at it for a long time. Bella's schedule opened up to me like a city map. Dense, structured, every hour accounted for, with the kind of precision that suggests not rigidity, but rather someone who has thought very carefully about how to make time do what she needs it to do. There were blocks for meetings, for solitary work, for what appeared to be a daily 30-minute walk, labeled simply peripatetic thinking, do not schedule, and for something on Tuesday and Thursday evenings labeled personal development, architecture theory. There was now a recurring block added to every weekday at 12:30 p.m. It was labeled lunch. CV. I looked at that block for a very long time. Then I accepted all the calendar invites. The first lunch was a Thursday. We ate at a Japanese restaurant 3 blocks from the office. Her choice. A place with clean lines and good light and a menu that rewarded knowing what you wanted, which felt like either a metaphor or just good curation. She ordered in Japanese, which I did not know she spoke. She caught my expression. I studied for a project in Osaka, she said. 2 years ago. The language is useful. I dislike relying on translation for technical conversation. What was the project? A cultural center on Nakanoshima. The brief required deep material specificity. A pause, during which she ate a precise amount of her meal. It fell through. Funding issues on the municipal side. But the research was significant. I've been trying to find a context for applying it. What were the materials? She looked at me for a moment, a look I had not quite seen before, or perhaps had seen and not registered, because it carried something that wasn't professional assessment. It was closer to, I wasn't expecting you to ask that. Shusugi ban, she said. Charred cedar, combined with a white concrete aggregate I was developing with a materials lab in Kyoto. The contrast between char and light stone, the way the surface reads differently at different times of day. It was something I couldn't stop thinking about. A very brief pause. I still have all the samples. I keep them in the storage room off my office. I'd like to see them, I said. If that would be appropriate. The look again, slightly different this time. Yes, she said. I'll arrange access. We ate in silence for a moment. It was not an uncomfortable silence, or rather, it was the specific kind of uncomfortable silence that sits right at the edge of becoming comfortable, the kind that 2 people generate when they are both in the process of realizing that they fit together in some unexpected way, that neither of them has quite found the language for yet. Can I ask you something? I said. You may. When you analyzed the email. I kept my voice even. What variables were you referring to? The ones you mentioned, that you'd been monitoring. She set down her chopsticks. An uncommon action. She typically continues performing minor tasks while speaking, as though stillness signals something she's reluctant to signal. Your work, she said. Your process. The way you approach a problem. Not just structurally, but philosophically. You ask questions other people in the team don't ask. You consider what a building means, not just what it does. A pause. And you are. You have a quality of presence. In a room, in a meeting, in a site visit. A quality that I have not found easy to account for in standard productivity metrics. I looked at her. She looked back, and her expression was doing the thing it sometimes did. That careful, layered thing. Like a drawing over a drawing over a drawing, where the real line is somewhere underneath all the technical notation. I'm not sure that was part of the performance review, I said. No, she agreed. It was not. The following 2 weeks were, I don't know how to describe them, except to say that they were the most confusing and the most quietly extraordinary weeks of my recent professional and personal life, which are 2 categories that were rapidly becoming impossible to separate. Bella Sterling, operating under the impression that she had entered a voluntary personal arrangement with me, turned out to be, the only word I can find is, devoted. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way of someone performing devotion for an audience. In the way of someone who has decided that something is worth her full attention and is now giving it precisely that. With the same focused intelligence and methodical care she brings to a complex structural brief. The flowers appeared on a Wednesday, white garden roses, delivered to my desk by someone from the facilities team, who handed them to me with an expression of benign neutrality. The card was printed, "She doesn't handwrite things, I would learn, because she considers her handwriting insufficiently precise." And it read, "I reviewed the literature on courtship signaling. White roses are traditional, and their neutrality of color is consistent with the office aesthetic. I thought you might appreciate the non-disruptive quality. BS. PS. Your section model for the Meridian project is excellent. The cantilever reads well. Well done. I read it twice. I put it on my desk next to the flowers. I took a photograph that I told myself was for documentation purposes, and then spent the rest of the morning looking at it. The calendar management started subtly. At first it was just the lunches, the daily 12:30 p.m. block, which Bella maintained with the same commitment she gave to her other recurring obligations. She did not cancel. She did not push back. She arrived at 12:28 every time, ordered with the efficiency of someone who had pre-decided, and spent the hour in conversation that was... I kept being surprised by this, genuinely interesting. She talked about buildings, about the physics of structures and the philosophy of space, and the way that great architecture does what all great things do, which is to hold something up while making the act of holding look effortless. She talked about light, about how much of her work is really just the management of light, the decision about where to let it in and where to keep it out, and how the shadows it makes are as much a part of the design as the walls. She talked about a building in Barcelona she had walked through at 22 that had made her understand, for the first time, why she wanted to do this. How she had stood in the atrium and felt something in her chest that she had later tried to identify and could only describe as recognition. As though the building was articulating something she had known but not had words for. She talked about her work with a precision and a passion that were not contradictory but symbiotic, as though the structure of her thinking was what allowed the passion to have somewhere to go. I talked too, about my own work, about why I had come to architecture from an oblique angle, through painting first, then sculpture, then materials, and finally the built environment, which is where all of it converged. About how I think about negative space the way other people think about what they fill it with. About a project I had done in grad school that had failed. A community center in a small town in New Jersey that never got built, that existed only as a model and a set of drawings that I still have, because the failure felt worth keeping. She had listened to that with particular attention. Why? She asked. Why do I keep it? Why did it fail? Funding and zoning and local politics, I said. The usual combination. But you still have the drawings. Yes. Because? I thought about it. Because the building was right, I said. The design was right. It answered the brief better than anything else I've produced, before or since. It just didn't get to exist. That's not the same as the design being wrong. She was quiet for a moment. I have a storage room, she said, full of projects that never got built. I know. You mentioned Osaka. Not just Osaka. There are a number of them. A pause. I don't talk about them to most people. Why not? Because most people interpret unsuccessful projects as failures. I find that distinction important but difficult to explain. The project isn't the building, I said. The project is the thinking. The building is just what happens if the circumstances align. She looked at me. Yes, she said. That's it exactly. The calendar management escalated in the third week. I had a standing weekly check-in with Thomas Kramer from the Structural Engineering Consultancy, a collaboration that had been running since before I joined the firm, and that was professionally important, but also socially pleasant, because Thomas is funny and easy to talk to, and we had developed a working relationship that functioned partly on genuine mutual respect and partly on the particular warmth of two people who understand the same technical problems. On Tuesday of the third week, Thomas arrived for our 3 p.m. check-in and found a reschedule notice in his calendar. The 3 p.m. meeting with Ms. Vasquez has been moved to a video call format, Thursdays at 4 p.m. Please confirm receipt. Office of IM, Sterling. Thomas sent me a bemused message asking if he'd done something wrong. I marched to Bella's office. She was at her drawing board. She looked up with the particular expression of someone who has not yet identified which objection is incoming. "Thomas's meeting," I said. "Yes." She returned her attention to the drawing. "In-person meetings with external consultants are an inefficient use of your creative time. Video format is operationally equivalent for information exchange. Bella." I waited until she looked at me again. "Thomas and I have a good working relationship. The in-person format is part of why it works. You have a sufficient working relationship with me for most of your project requirements," she said. "I can provide structural input directly. I have the background." I stared at her. Something in her expression shifted. Very slightly, in the way that things shift for people who don't show much, and therefore show a great deal in small movements. "I will reinstate the meeting," she said after a moment. It was not an appropriate restructuring. "Thank you. You are welcome." She said it with the careful precision of someone using a phrase they find slightly unwieldy, a beat. I'm aware that the adjustment was an overreach. I looked at her. She was looking at the drawing board. Not at the drawing, exactly, but in the direction of it. The way someone looks at a middle distance when they are thinking about something they are not sure how to say. "Are you all right?" I asked. The question surprised her. I could tell because she looked up faster than usual, with a fractional unguardedness that was immediately disciplined back into its standard form. "Yes," she said. Yes." "Okay." I stood there for another second. "Your drawing is upside down, by the way." She looked at the drawing board, looked back at me, and something happened in the corners of her mouth that was not quite a smile. Or perhaps was exactly a smile, expressed by someone who has learned to keep smiles very small and close to the body, so they don't take up more room than feels safe. "That's intentional," she said. "It's a technique for identifying proportion errors." "Is it?" "Yes. I'll send you the reference." She sent me the reference at 4:47 p.m. that afternoon. It was a real technique. She had found a paper about it. I added it to a folder on my laptop that I had, without quite deciding to, titled B. The first time we were accidentally domestic happened on a Friday, 3.5 weeks in. I was working late. Not unusual, but later than usual, because the Meridian project had hit a wall on the eastern facade integration, and I was too stubborn to leave it unresolved for the weekend. The office was empty by 7. The lights in the creative wing ran on motion sensors and had given up on me by 8, at which point I was working by laptop light and the ambient glow from the city outside. I heard her before I saw her. Not footsteps. She walks too quietly for that. But the small sound of her door opening, which has a particular quality because the mechanism is heavier than the standard office hardware, and she always opens it at the same controlled speed. She came around the corner and stopped when she saw me. She was carrying 2 containers of takeout. Japanese, from the same restaurant we'd been going to for lunches. "I thought," she started, and then stopped. "Thought what?" I asked. A pause. Very brief. But in Bella Sterling's vocabulary of pauses, this one translated as something close to, "I have been caught doing something I intended as considerate but did not plan to be caught doing." "I ordered dinner," she said. "I was going to—" A pause. "I had a reasonable assumption, given your project timeline, that you might still be in the office. I thought it was logistically efficient to order for 2. I looked at the takeout containers. She looked at the takeout containers. "That's not efficient," I said. "That's thoughtful." "The 2 are not mutually exclusive," she said, with the tone of someone who has given this argument before and is not convinced it's working. "No," I agreed. "They're not." She set the containers down on the work table. She got 2 sets of chopsticks from the bag. She arranged both setups with the same care she gives everything, parallel, at equal distances from the edge, as though the geometry of a shared meal matters as much as its contents. And then she sat down across from me, and we ate together in the half-dark of an empty office while Manhattan glowed outside. And I showed her the facade problem, and she looked at it for a long time and then said, "The issue is the rhythm. The fenestration is treating the east facade as a structural problem, when it's actually a perceptual one." She took a piece of paper from the recycling tray and drew something in 4 lines. "It's not about how much glass. It's about where the eye goes first." I looked at the sketch. The sketch was right. "How did you—" I started. "I looked at it for a long time," she said. "Sometimes that's all it takes." We worked until 10. She packed up the takeout containers. She put on her coat with the same economy of motion she brings to everything. She stopped at the door. "Carla." She didn't turn around. "If the weekend is productive, send me where you land. I'd like to see it." "Okay," I said. She left. I sat in the emptying quiet of the office for a long time, and I thought about a thing that structural engineers know, which is that some loads are not transferred all at once. They are distributed slowly, over time, across the whole of a structure, until one day you look at the building and realize it has been quietly carrying something for longer than you knew. I want to talk about the moment I knew, not the moment I admitted it. That came later, in a harder way, on a rooftop under a particular sky. But the moment I knew, it was the 4th week, a Tuesday. We had just come back from a site visit to the Meridian Project, a real site, scaffolding and noise and raw concrete, and the particular smell of a building in the process of becoming itself. Bella had been in her element, moving through the space with the certainty of someone for whom built structure is first language, pointing out the places where the reality of the building had diverged from the drawings, identifying the decisions that would need to be revisited. She had crouched down at one point to examine a joint at the base of a column, really crouched, in her gray wool coat, not worrying about the concrete dust. And she had put her hand on the joint and just felt it, with her full attention, the way you touch something when you are trying to understand it from the inside. And then she had looked up at me, because I was standing next to her. And something about the angle, the unguarded focus on her face, the concrete dust on the knee of her coat, the way she was looking at me with the same attention she had just given to the joint, as though I was something she was trying to understand from the inside, had sent something through me that I would not have been able to articulate in any technical language. Recognition, she had called it. Standing in an atrium in Barcelona at 22. "I know what you mean," I had thought, and had not said. She had stood up, brushed the dust from her coat with 2 precise movements, looked at the column. "The reinforcement reads well in person," she said. "Better than the drawing suggested." "Yes," I said. "You look like you're thinking about something." "I am." She waited. "The way you looked at that joint," I said. "That's how I look at the drawings you send me." A long pause. "I don't know what to do with that," she said. "I know," I said. "Me neither." And then, London. She told me on a Thursday, which felt appropriate, because every major thing in this story seems to happen on a Thursday, as though the week had decided to save its consequences for the 4th day. We were having lunch, the usual restaurant, the usual table, the usual light. Bella had been slightly more quiet than usual, which in her case registers as a specific quality of stillness, rather than an absence of speech. She thinks out loud sometimes, in the contained way of someone for whom thought and language are close neighbors. And when she is not doing that, there is an additional texture to her silence. She set down her chopsticks. "I have something to tell you," she said. I looked at her. "The firm's New York-London axis has been restructuring for some time," she said. "The London office requires a strategic reset. I've agreed, to take operational responsibility for the London transition." A pause. "My relocation is scheduled for 2 weeks from today." The word landed in my chest with the particular weight of something that has been in the air long enough to have become invisible. "London," I said. "Yes." She looked at me steadily. "And your transfer has been approved. The paperwork is already filed. I had it prepared last week. You would join the London team as lead creative on the new residential portfolio. It's a significant opportunity." A beat, the smallest of hesitations in her standard delivery. "We would relocate together." I looked at her. She looked back. And somewhere in the careful architecture of her expression, in the precision and the control and the layers underneath, I could see it, the thing she was trying to say with transfer paperwork and residential portfolios, and we would relocate together. That she had, without making an announcement about it, been planning for a future that included me. That she had taken the ridiculous, overwrought, accidental email from a Thursday bar night and built it into something real in her own quiet, methodical, flowers that match the lobby way. And I was in love with her. I had known that for a while, probably, but I knew it very clearly in that moment, sitting across from her in a restaurant with good light, while she waited for my answer with the careful stillness of someone who does not know how to ask for what she wants, except by making the logistical arrangements for it. I was in love with her. And she didn't know the truth. That night, I sat on the fire escape of my apartment on West 89th. The narrow kitchen, the brick wall view, the film posters, the cold October air. And I held my phone, and I thought about what it means to keep a structure standing by hiding the crack in the foundation. I thought about the unbuilt community center in New Jersey, the building that was right, but never got to exist. I thought about the difference between a building being wrong and a building not getting to exist, and whether those things could apply to a person, to a feeling, to a mistake that had started as a joke and become something I couldn't joke about anymore. I had 2 weeks before London. 2 weeks before I either got on a plane with her and let the lie go with me and built something on top of a crack I would always know was there, or told her the truth and watched what I had done with the truth. I didn't know, that night, which one I was going to choose. But I knew one thing, sitting on the fire escape in the cold, with Manhattan bright around me and the brick wall close, the way walls get close when you're in the process of choosing what to build against them. Whatever was growing between us, whatever it was, whatever it had become over lunches and late nights and concrete dust and 4 lines drawn on recycled paper, was not the product of an email. It was the product of her, and of me, and of 14 months of watching someone hold up a building without letting the holding show. The email was just the crack that let the light in.